Hey, it's Alex, and you're listening to the Everyday Stories podcast, a podcast about the everyday stories from the people you know and the people you don't know, here to help you learn a thing or two about life and the stories that define us. Today, we're talking to Claire Zou, or Miss Zou. Claire is an elementary school teacher who started her teaching career in Brooklyn, where she taught fourth grade at an uncommon charter school. Over time, she grew critical of the top-heavy charter system and has since decided to pivot to the NYC Department of Education, or DOE for short. As part of this pivot, she is spending a year teaching abroad in Taiwan on a Fulbright grant. When she returns to New York, she hopes to utilize her improved Chinese to serve at a DOE school in either Chinatown or Sunset Park. When Claire is not teaching, she enjoys woodcarving, gardening, and hot springing. Today, we're going to talk to Claire about her time as a teacher and her pivot to the DOE. So, Claire, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Oh my God, of course. The first question I have for you was, as we grow up, how did teachers impact your life? And did that motivate you to want to teach in the first place?
I feel like the special part about being a teacher is that, every single person you encounter has had a teacher that has made an impact on them. And so I think that was a small reason of why I wanted to become a teacher. There's definitely been lots of teachers that have influenced me. I've always just found school to be a safe space. I've also always been that teacher's pet where I always found a lot of joy and gratification getting close to a teacher. And even at the college level, two professors that I still keep in touch with. It's really special to me. But I think the biggest person who's had an influence on me becoming a teacher is actually my older sister. She went to school in Baltimore, same as me, but she decided to stay in Baltimore to keep teaching. And she's always known that she's wanted to be a teacher probably since middle school. And when I first got to college, I was so adamantly I'm not going to become a teacher. I'm interested in social policy. I'm interested in sociology. I'm interested in education policy. But I was I don't want to be just Chelsea. And so for a long time, I was doing all the things that were adjacent to teaching. I was doing a lot of extracurriculars that also where I was interfacing with kids. And then my junior year, I was applying to internships and stuff. And then I ended up getting a teaching fellowship, so much for not wanting to become a teacher, but I got a teaching fellowship, where I was teaching virtually online because of COVID for the summer. And then when I was deciding whether or not I wanted to take on a full-time job after my senior year I was a teaching fellowship with Uncommon, or do Teach for America, I was talking to my sister and she was just well, if you're only going to do it, I think at this point in my life, I was oh, I still might want to go into education policy, which looking back now is 20 years old. I was what did I know about education policy then? But I was talking to my sister and she's well, if you're only going to do it for 2 years, you might as well not teach at all. Because her biggest thing is teacher turnover and how people view this job as just a stepping stone and something that you can be transient in. And so that really struck something in me. I don't want to say struck a chord. I think it just it gave me stronger conviction to be more committed to teaching. And so I was okay, actually, put policy on the side. I don't even really know what that is. And I'll just go into teaching, let myself fall in love with this job. And if I do, I'll keep doing it. And I don't want to just view it as something to do in the meantime while I'm figuring out a future life career. So that's kind of, my sister has been the biggest influence for sure. And she's still teaching.
God.
She's in her 8th year of teaching now, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
And she wants to do it for a long time. Yeah.
Does she teach elementary, middle school, high school, college?
Yeah, she teaches 3rd grade in Baltimore. And she's been at the same school for the past 8 years too.
So you're both elementary school teachers.
Yeah. She's 3rd grade, I'm 4th grade. It's fun to compare curriculums. Also, we teach in different cities, but our grade levels are so similar. So it's funny to compare what our kids are and aren't learning. And also we like last year we did a fun like pen pal situation. So our kids wrote to each other and it worked out because they're like kind of similar writing levels. There's actually a noticeable difference between third grade writing and fourth grade writing. It was cute. It was fun.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, why elementary school teaching? Because you can do, I feel like kindergarten, elementary, middle school, high school, college, but why specifically elementary?
Yeah. Okay, logistically, I didn't have the qualifications to teach older grades because I studied sociology and international relations in college. And so if you want to teach like a subject specific class in middle school or high school, at least in New York, because there's it's by state, like what the qualifications are for teaching. You have to have like majored in like, if you want to be a biology teacher, you have to have majored in biology. If you want to teach history, you have to have majored in something that counts as history. So sociology didn't really like fall in the realm of one of those subject specifics. And so I got placed in elementary, but I still like fully stand upper elementary over lower elementary. I think fourth grade is the absolute sweetest spot to be teaching.
Why?
The kids, it's just like the perfect balance of sweet and mature. They're so sweet and like they're still like so in awe of like the smallest things, and you can use like stickers and stuffed animals on them and like all these different like little kid incentives, and they still like their eyes light up. And then they're also like pretty grown at that point too. They can talk to you about like real life, and they're like learning how to deal with their emotions like at a more like beyond just crying. Like they can actually use their words and like tell you how they're feeling. And so you can still get like pretty deep with them. I feel like I've like had to like teach like nonviolent conflict resolution to my students as they've like encountered like bullying or like they have crushes on each other. And it's just like, it's at an age where you're like, oh, I can actually like impart some communication skills on you.
Well, I think teaching, especially at that age, you're not even just teaching them like different subjects in school, but you're teaching them like lifelong skills that they're going to remember for forever. Because I still remember like my grade 2 teacher playing these like math songs to us, and I still remember all the tunes to every single song. So now I guess I know my multiplications really well, but I also know all these random math songs in my silly little head.
And sometimes they're just useful, you know, when we're playing like, how are you smarter than a fifth grader?
Oh my God, so true. Well, for context for people that are listening to this podcast, there was one night that Claire made all of us friends are you smarter than your fifth grader? And we were not, at least for me, I was not good at it. Maybe it was like American education system and like I'm Canadian, but I really think that's just an excuse because I was really bad at it. And I feel like growing up, I was I think I was like more so a teacher's pet in elementary school, not so much in high school. But I was like so goody two shoes and such a nerd and very introverted. But I was convinced when I was in fifth grade that I could be on Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader and would like be so good at it. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, like the one that I played with you, it was a travesty. I was like, okay, I need to like humble myself a little bit.
I was really pulling out things from the depths of my brain, like really like standard specific fourth grade and fifth grade knowledge. So it was everyone.
It was perfect though.
You guys did good though. It was fun.
Oh, thank you. Going back to, you mentioned that when you were in school, it was a very safe space for you. And I wanted to ask you about teaching during COVID and also the impact that COVID has had on teaching kids, especially like in elementary school, because I also have like other friends who are teachers as well. And they've said they haven't really like specified anything, but have said that when kids were home at that age, learning online and virtually, they almost lost a lot of like social skills that were taken back into the classroom when everyone had to go back. And there was almost like this like gap of learning, not necessarily in like the education or the courses that they were learning about, but actually like that social or like life aspect, if you will. What are your thoughts on that?
So real. Okay, for context, I started teaching in 2021. So I wasn't teaching during the full virtual year. When I came in the fall, it wasn't even hybrid. My school had the whole charter network that was part of had was like pushing for in person, and so it was like a weird setup. But this is what I was used to my first year because it was my first year of teaching. All the desks were 3 feet apart. All the kids had to wear masks. You couldn't talk during lunch. Like if you were eating, the rule was you eat quietly, and then if you want to talk, you have to put your mask back on. This is just like the time when all the rules about COVID were so arbitrary. And I was just
Yeah.
like, this is still really, this would still cause an outbreak if anyone had it. Anyway, so that year was already like a socially weird year for kids because they weren't always able to socialize and they weren't able to sit next to their friends. And the teachers were also wearing masks while we were teaching, so they couldn't like see our full facial expressions. I don't know what it was like pre-COVID because I guess I worked with kids in like small tutoring groups when I was in college, but that's not the same as a classroom experience. But what I have noticed is since my first year of teaching, I taught for 2 more years so I taught for a total of 3 years at my first school. And like the difference between the first year and the second year, the second and the third year, socially in the kids was very self-evident. The first year kids were just more shy and introverted. Kids are unwilling to were less willing to raise their hands. I think also partly because of the academic gap, they knew they weren't, I'm sure they were like aware that they didn't learn as much as they could have in the past year. And so maybe they were more nervous to raise their hands when we were in person. But then by the second year and the third year, the kids were just like a lot more, in my opinion, they seemed a lot more like extroverted and outgoing. And they were just like and when there was conflict, I felt like they were able to deal with it better. I think being at home and just like constantly being around your family or your parents, you're able to be a little bit more babied, and you are like the center of attention, and like maybe you feel like maybe a little bit entitled, but yeah, that's okay to say about the kids. Yeah, they were a little bit entitled. But that's a result of like their circumstances, and that's going to happen to anyone who stays home for that long. And like you just saw less and less of that. At least I saw less and less of that over the past couple years. And so, yeah, there's definitely a noticeable change socially in the kids with each year.
Yeah. I always wonder what it would be like over time, because obviously we've seen very short-term effects of the impact of COVID on teaching, and not just teaching in the classroom, but how this has affected kids in their ability to learn certain things in specific environments too. So I'm curious to see how this like takes on as years go on and they go into like high school, college, out in the real world, and to see
we need like a
if there is
longitudinal
any sort of
study.
impact. Yeah, or if it just like fades out, because obviously like since we're back in the classroom now, that like maybe they'll just like catch on to what those gaps were. But I mean, only time will tell really for that.
I think like another big social difference, and I would partly attribute this to COVID, is like the kids are on their iPads all day, either for class or for like entertainment. And I mean, it's just the ubiquity of iPads now and phones. But like, if anything is affecting the kids socially, it's like they can't not be on their iPads or their phones or be referencing things happening on TikTok. And I think that that's a whole nother can of worms. But yeah, I feel like the iPad generation is gonna really see some effects socially.
And is it all of the kids that have iPads, or are the schools telling you, we want you to learn with this iPad, with this technology?
Oh, at least in my school, phones and iPads were banned, but they had like Chromebooks that they would be able to pull out like after they finished work. And you could tell like kids would rush. If we like said that if you finish, you can go on your Chromebook, they would rush the work and give, like some of the kids would give mediocre work just so they could go play games on their Chromebook. And so it's just like any screen that they have access to, they will be glued to.
Yeah. Also, speaking of technology, how do you think AI has impacted, at least in like elementary school? I don't know how much that would, because I think AI nowadays, like in the teaching world, we hear a lot about it through like high school homework or project or assignments or
Yeah.
even in college. But I wonder like what it's like for elementary school teaching and with the kids.
No, that's scary. It's scary for the kids, in my opinion. I was literally just telling a friend how I'm so grateful that I like graduated college like before ChatGPT became a thing, and like I was able to develop my critical thinking skills and my writing skills. Um, I feel like AI only just became like a really like mainstream thing to use in the past year or so, while I've like at the tail end of my last year of teaching in New York, and then as I've been in Taiwan. Um, and so I don't know how it's affecting kids right. I don't know how it's affecting elementary schoolers right now. I assume not nearly to the same extent as older kids. Um, but I fear that the writing that I've seen my kids in New York do has not been that, like, writing is really, at least among my kids, has not been great. And I fear that when they get to middle school and high school and they have to like keep writing longer essays, it's just, they're going to over rely on that. And so, but it's like, as teachers, you can't like control whether or not a kid uses ChatGPT. And so it's finding more creative ways to like work, like this technology will be with us for a long time. So it's finding creative ways to have them use it, and also like while still building up their own skill set. But I'm
Yeah,
nervous.
I think as teachers, you all have to like constantly adapt to so many different things with whether it's the curriculum or the technology that happens. It, I mean, it probably keeps you on your toes like a ton. But I wanted to pivot to the pivot that you were talking about, where you noted that you grew critical of the top-heavy charter system and you wanted to pivot to the DOE. So I wanted to ask you what happened during your time working in charter schools that made you want to switch.
Yeah. Okay. I'm seeing like what I want to say that's on the record because I'm still looking for a job for when I come back to New York.
Okay.
But I think my criticisms of charter schools, and I like won't be like specific about names or anything, but I just feel like charter schools in general. I said that I worked at Uncommon, and like for people who don't know Uncommon, it's similar to like Success Academy or Achievement First or like all these big charter networks in New York. And they are known for serving primarily like Black and Brown, low income, working class families. And the mission is admirable. The execution, less so. I think when I came into it's so interesting how when I came in 2021, like for August training, this was right after like BLM 20. Yeah, this was right after like the BLM protests of 2020. We come back in for in-person training 2021. They're like, okay, we've like heard all this feedback. They got a lot of like criticism from students in their own network and from teachers, Black and Brown students and teachers saying like, this is how we feel like we've been treated unfairly or unsafely in our workplace. And so the leadership was just like, okay, we're gonna like change these behavioral policies and stuff, disciplinary policies, so that they're more so that they're less racist. And so like would be like pre 2020, they're like, we're gonna like all the kids had to sit like this, like hands folded and star, and like backs had to be absolutely straight. When you're walking in the hallway, they'd be like hands glued to your side, eyes forward, can't look at the walls left or right. It was very much like it was giving like policing kids' bodies, which is really problematic, obviously, especially when you teach school of Black and Brown kids. It can be very authoritarian if teachers are like carrying out these like behavioral expectations like through and through. And so then, yeah, that PD, they're like PD professional development. They're like, that's racist. We're gonna like move away from that. And you can give them 3 ways to sit. They can sit like this, or they can sit like this, or they can sit like this. When I was like, okay, I guess it's slightly better. I don't know. This is my first year teaching, so I don't know. And then come my second year of teaching in PD, they just like got rid of that. They're like, everyone has to sit like this again. This is a very small example of just like how they walked back on things that before were racist, and then the next year they're like, nope, we're gonna like reinstate it and like not really give a reason why. And that's a very small example of like all the behavior things that they're very like nitpicky about. And in a way that, yeah, it just feels like policing kids' bodies and doesn't really like let them be them, or it like makes them scared of like breaking the rules and authority. And I feel like especially for the kids that we're serving, it's just like, do we want them to be so submissive to authority? Is that like the kind of like lessons or the survival skills we want to be teaching them, especially in a place like New York where the police presence is like ever more growing crazier and crazier. But I think I just struggled with like, how are we teaching our kids to critically think about the rules that are placed upon them? It's like people in higher level roles would just like come like pop into your classroom spontaneously. Sometimes they would give you a heads up, sometimes they would come in spontaneously, and that's like stressful too. They'd always be checking in on you and just like yeah, there were always, I mean, as you got older and you became more veteran, fewer eyes on you, but it's just like there can always be someone like just popping into your classroom, and then like even taking over your classroom. They would like come in, and if they felt like you weren't teaching the lesson right, they'd be like, can I do it? Which gives like a weird power. And they'd be like,
wait, that's crazy.
It's like a weird like power play right in front of the kids too. I guess maybe the kids are used to it now, but like the kids can tell between adults like who has more power. And sometimes it just feels like it's like, oh, are you just doing it for the sake? Like, can you not just tell me, like, give me the feedback after the lesson, I'll implement it later. Yeah, it's a weird power struggle. And then sometimes those people from higher up, this part is what like frustrated me the most, was when people from higher up would come into my classroom. This happened 2 distinct times, but probably more than that. And they would pick on one of my students who has like behavioral challenges, like is either like just like too hyperactive and needs several. These students might need several reminders compared to like other students who need only 1 or 2. And so we'll give them several reminders, and we won't give them a consequence right away because we know that they just need more reminders. But they would come into the classroom and they see this one kid is like fidgeting like crazy, and this higher up person is like, you need to like, they're telling them to stop, to pay attention. Obviously the kid doesn't listen the first, also because the kid doesn't know who like these people coming into the classroom are. They're like, who is this random woman coming in? And then when the kid doesn't comply, the higher up person tries to like exert even more like power. Then they'll like okay, you're immediately going to red, which is like the consequence system is like all the kids start on green in a day and they could go to yellow or red. And I'm like, you can't just change my kids. And for like a 4th grader, it's a big deal to be like put on red. And like it ruins your whole day. You like feel bad about yourself. And so the fact that people from higher up could just walk into your classroom, not have like a relationship with the kid, think that just because one kid is like overly fidgety, that means that they need to like receive a consequence, just like pissed me off to no end. And I was like, this is the philosophy of like these charter network. And I know like my charter network is not, it's not out of the ordinary in that. And I also want to say all this with a grain of like, I loved the school I taught at. I absolutely loved the school. I loved my coworkers. I loved my kids, my criticisms. And I think as like a teacher and as like one of the lower employees, I guess, like I feel like it is my right to be critical of people who are higher up, the big bosses, the people who are in power. And so I loved my school. It's just the people who run the network. I have my criticisms of them, and it would be nice if they were more open to hearing that feedback. But
what I think it's all, everything that you said, it sounds like it stems from you, quote unquote, being like a protective parent over the kids. Because as a teacher, you know these kids the best. You go like literally day in and day out. You know like everything about them. You know their personalities, what works for them, how they learn. But I think the idea of someone that just comes in randomly and like thinks they know the situation without all of this context, I can see how like for yourself, you're like, no. But like it's going to be okay. Like, just hear me out. But it sounds like they're just kind of coming in, assessing the situation as is, but not taking in like anything else that has happened maybe with that kid beforehand. So it's interesting that you bring that up. And I wanted to ask you as well, when you decided to study abroad, or not study abroad, teach abroad, when you decided to teach abroad in Taiwan, why Taiwan out of all places, and why did you actually want to teach outside of the US?
Yeah. I was so hesitant to apply because I'm just like critical of Fulbright as like a soft neo-imperial like branch of the US government trying to like spread American culture and the English language and all of that, yada, yada, yada. Also critical of like, because of my sister being like teacher turnover is a terrible issue, and like going abroad to only teach 1 year at a school, I'm like, you can't like make that much of an impact just staying 1 year at a school. So with all these like things in mind, I still applied and still decided to come because I think one of the most important parts of being a teacher is building strong family partnerships and making sure the kids are supported in school and outside of school. And I really want to teach in like a predominantly Chinese immigrant neighborhood when I go back to New York, just so I can teach, like, I can see what it feels like to teach kids who look like me. I guess I'm doing that now, but culturally, like, the kids and I have very different lived experiences. And I want to improve my Chinese in order to, like, build those family partnerships. I had an awesome work bestie and also just, like, real life bestie at my job last year in New York. Shout out Jade. She can speak Haitian Creole, and most of our students in our school were like West African and Caribbean. And so there would be times like parent teacher conferences where you need like translators because the parents can't speak English as well. But like Jade and a lot of those families like spoke Haitian Creole because that was a large part of our population. And I know Jade like conducted some of her parent teacher conferences in that language, and like it made it so much easier for I'm just like, the parents must like trust her so much more, and also like breaks down other like just like logistical barriers of being able to communicate with them. And yeah, I just think like being able to speak a kid's family's home language like just makes it that much easier to build trust. So I'm hoping to improve my Chinese so that next year or this upcoming school year I can do that with my future kids' families.
So in Taiwan, are you currently teaching in Chinese?
I'm like teaching bilingually, so like half in Chinese, half in English. Yeah, I think
So is it a bilingual school or program?
I'm like, it's a bilingual school. Okay, so I teach gym for context. For like most of the classes I teach, it's gym, which I was not expecting when I came here. I'm like currently teaching, we're about to start the table tennis unit and the soccer unit.
That's so cool. I love that you're
and
teaching
we just came
gym.
out in basketball and frisbee. But I'm supposed to be teaching like the English part of it, which is like, this is not the ideal execution of a bilingual classroom, but for these classes, I like get the first 10, 15 minutes of class to like teach them words relevant English words to the unit we're learning. And then I'll like play a game with them. And I'll try to explain the entire game in English and then see if the kids understand it. And then like, I'll boost it with like, or I'll like translate as needed or have one of the kids translate as needed. But technically this is supposed to be like a content language integrated learning. So they're supposed to be learning like their new language plus the content at the same time. So ideally, like the main teacher, I'm not the main gym teacher. There's like a main gym teacher. Ideally, the main teacher would have grasp of both languages. And so that they can continuously teach like the content and the language at the same time. But because my co-teachers can't really speak English that well, I just like teach the first 10 minutes in English, and then they get the latter 30 minutes to teach in Chinese, like the actual content. Yeah, it's not.
It's so interesting
ideal,
that you're teaching gym.
I
love it.
I teach 18 periods in a week, and 16 of them are gym. 2 of them are what we call life skills to like first and second graders. And in those classes, I'm like full like classroom teacher, like 40 minutes, like English and Chinese. But for most of the week, I'm like a gym teacher.
That is so cool. I kind of love that for you. Because I think most of the time you're probably in the classroom. So it's like a different experience to like be in the gym and like teaching the kids all these different sports. But to your point about that you want to improve your Chinese, and when you come back to New York, being able to teach in like Chinatown or Sunset Park, which for people that are unaware, Sunset Park is also like predominantly Chinese Asian neighborhood as well. Is there anything else that you want to take from your time teaching in Taiwan back to New York? Anything that you've learned other than obviously improving your Chinese?
Yeah. I think what I've realized, this ties back to the question about like why I was critical of charter schools too, is their classroom management here is a lot more lax and a lot more chill. And it works. Like they're not like being super harsh with the kids or like yelling at them, or like, at least to my knowledge, they don't have the same sort of disciplinary. Maybe they do, and I'm just like not aware of it because I'm not like 100% fluent, and I'm not like I'm in gym and I'm not in like a normal classroom. But it seems a lot more chill, and I'm like, okay, what I want to shed when I go back to New York is like I want to shed some of the classroom management training I got from Uncommon, because I know it's a bit intense and excessive, and it's like, my initial impression of it was like policing kids' bodies, and I want to like unlearn that and continuously be critical of that. And then now seeing how the teachers in Taiwan do it, they just like, it's okay for like kids to like chat a little bit, and like it's okay for there to be small noises in the background, and it's okay if like the kids call out in like a reasonable way. And I feel like back in my old school, like that would be an absolute no-no. But like just seeing like allowing kids to be joyful and excited about the learning, but then also keeping it reasonably controlled, like you can still get a lot of effective learning out of that. So I just want to be chill next year when I go into my
Chill
next class.
teacher, Miss Zou,
Chill teacher.
chill teacher. And my last question for you is, do you have any larger hopes or dreams about your future in teaching?
I think this is not like a huge hope, but I feel really like stable in like, I feel like I have my classroom management down. Content, if I stay in upper elementary, I feel down. Like I want to lead an extracurricular, like an after school activity. And I said that I'm now interested in wood carving, and I've always been interested in gardening. And so I think it'd be really fun to start like clubs at my next school, and just like be able to extend my interests outside of school to my kids and see if that like sparks anything in them. But in terms of like long term, I just want to stay in education. I like working with kids. I like working with kids more than adults. So I see myself being a teacher for at least a few more years. And if I pivot, it will at least stay within education in some way.
Yeah, I have so much respect for you as an elementary school teacher, because I feel like I feel like everyone maybe at some point thinks about teaching, or like if they were a teacher, what year or grades would they teach? I could not teach kids. I just like, I think it takes truly what?
I feel like you'd be so good with middle schoolers, and that's a hard age range, but I feel like you'd be really good at it.
I think I could do like middle school, high school, and college, but there's just something about like elementary school. Like I don't think I'm really that good with like young kids. So I truly think it like takes a certain type of person. And also like for me, trying to instill like really good habits within them. Not to say that I have bad habits, but just like the idea that like you're in their like pivotal moments of like their brain forming. So like anything you say, anything you do, like they can really take that like for the rest of their life. And so I think it's for more so like that pressure, and maybe like other people can relate to that of like elementary school teaching. But I have so much respect for you, and I want to say thank you so much, Claire, for hopping on this podcast. I always think it's so interesting, the teaching world, and hearing everyone's different thoughts who are teachers, their perspective on it. And there's always so many things developing within that whole field. So I appreciate you coming on. But before the podcast ends, I've been ending every single episode with a quote because it's based off of my love for Criminal Minds, where they start and end each episode with a quote. So my quote for you, I was like searching like teaching quotes, and the quote that I have is, Teaching is a very noble profession that shapes the character, caliber, and future of an individual. If people remember me as a good teacher, that will be the biggest honor for me. And that's from PJ Abdul Kalam, I believe.
That's so sweet. Immediately, I thought of a student from my first year of teaching who like gave me a bunch of roses at graduation because his dad was like, oh, he said that you're the best teacher that he's ever had. And I was like blown away because it was my first year of teaching. And I was like, at the end of that first year, I was about to break down. I was like, I can't do this job anymore. And getting that bouquet of, I was a bad teacher my first year of teaching, as everyone can attest to, like first year of teaching is your worst. And then to get that bouquet of roses from like literally one of my favorite students, I was like, okay, I can keep going.
Well, I feel like those moments, like you cherish so much because you can obviously instill so many good things within the students that they can keep for forever. But you probably, as your teaching career goes on, like you'll like truly reach and have these relationships with certain kids that really impact you as well. So I'm really glad to hear that. And the roses are so cute.
I know. I was like, Gary, you didn't have to.
Oh my God, that's so sweet. But anyways, thank you, Claire, for joining again. And for those tuning in, we'll see you next week. Thank you. Okay.
Bye.